guys, it's Lucy O'Brien here from IGN. I am here with...
Luke Riley, also from IGN.
Yes, and we're here today to talk about Shinji Mikami's latest game, The Evil Within. So
You're here to talk about it. I'm here to listen.
Well, you described yourself earlier as the chump. Why did you describe yourself as the chump?
Because I have no idea about anything to do with survival horror.
Right.
So,
well, there you go. And I'm a massive fan of survival horror, so I was extremely fortunate to be able to go to Tokyo last week and check out the game.
Tell me about the game, Lucy.
All right, so The Evil Within, as I mentioned, Mikami-san's return to the genre that he helped popularize.
Why is this guy a big deal?
Well, he sort of... People call him the father of survival horror. He wasn't necessarily the first guy to create a survival horror game, or what has become what we know as survival horror today. But he certainly helped usher it into the mainstream's consciousness with Resident Evil, aka Biohazard, which is what it was called in Japan. And subsequently he went on to produce the Resident Evil sequels, and then he was also the director of Resident Evil 4, which sort of changed the genre on its head again. So he's basically sort of seen the evolution of survival horror to what it is today. But he's not very happy with where it's sitting right now, because obviously survival horror has kind of evolved into something that is far more action-orientated.
Yeah, well, 5 and 6 were very kind of jarringly action-orientated.
They were, and he had nothing to do with those games. So what he's doing with The Evil Within is he's ushering in pure survival horror back again. So he wants to give the genre its kind of, a renaissance, essentially. And The Evil Within is really looking to do that. I'll give you a little sort of rundown of the story. So it's centered around a guy named Sebastian, who he's a detective. He's called in, he and his colleagues are called in to investigate a homicide that has taken place at a inner city mental asylum.
Full of people with glass in their face.
Well, no, that comes later.
Okay, all right.
So it's a very sort of almost like a cliche setup, but it's not a cliche. What we saw was not a sort of cliche game at all. It was it's playing Tango Gameworks, which is Mikami's studio. They're playing very much with sort of our perceptions of what is real and what is not real and that sort of thing. So Sebastian goes into this hospital. There are bodies everywhere. He's knocked unconscious, and
classic,
and by a hooded figure, and then the game begins proper, essentially. So he wakes up. Just there are a few spoilers ahead, so if you don't want to know anything about this game, then stop watching now.
Wait, why are you watching?
but yeah, he wakes up and he's dangling from a meat hook, and he's in a meat locker in a sort of alternate mental asylum. So in Silent Hill, well, did you ever play Silent Hill?
No.
Well, for the viewers out there, in Silent Hill, when Silent Hill will suddenly change from reality to a sort of alternate reality, where everything is a lot darker, grimier, blood splattered.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. So that's where Sebastian wakes up. There's a big sort of blood splattered butcher kind of monster storming around, ripping Sebastian's fellow victims off their hooks and gutting them on a big sort of butcher's block. It's very sort of like visceral and
pleasant.
It's gross. It's really gross. But it's kind of beautiful gore as well. Like they're using the id Tech 5 engine, and which has only been used in one game before, which was Rage, of course, which was a good-looking game.
Did really well, that game, right?
Well, it was a good-looking game. It was a good-looking game. So it's all realized in id Tech 5. They've modified it heavily because obviously that's a first-person engine. This is a third-person, over-the-shoulder, classic Mikami game. So it looks incredible, and you can kind of see every single splatter of blood, every single scuff mark, every single hair on the back of this guy's neck. It's gorgeous to look at.
So it's heavy on atmosphere, not so much on like just in-your-face action
Yeah, well, certainly the prologue that we saw was very much centered on showing us that this is a game that's all about tension, that's all about, you know, building up that sense of, oh my god, what is around the corner. And basically the way that they showed this is with this section, Sebastian has to escape from this meat locker and this butcher. And he does so, and it's all really tense, and he gets the key and he makes his way out, and then he trips an alarm. And then of course in classic, yeah, and in sort of classic Mikami tradition, the butcher bursts through the door and he's wielding a giant chainsaw. So for those Resident Evil 4 fans out there, you kind of know this sort of enemy that I'm talking about here. Sebastian has to escape from this guy, and he's limping and he's got no weapon, and basically the whole next section is all about him just hiding from this giant sort of behemoth who basically, if he gets caught, just gets a chainsaw to the neck, which we were actually, Tango demonstrated that for us because, you know, basically saying that the only way to get out of this situation is by avoiding this guy rather than killing him.
Sounds draining.
It was draining to watch, and the thing is, it was so stressful that the guy demoing it at Tango was trying to show us how Sebastian can use his environment in order to distract enemies. So he picks up an empty bottle and he throws it, but he's kind of, this guy is kind of nervous, and this chainsaw wielding maniac is just going like that and sort of just raging basically around this room. Very erratic movements, very unpredictable. And the demo guy like threw the bottle and he sort of missed, and instead of it sort of distracting it, it hits the guy, it hits the chainsaw wielding guy instead, and just sort of drops off, and the guy just keeps raging.
Does it make him angrier?
It looked like it made him angrier. And so the demo guy was going, oh shit. And in the end, like, Sebastian makes a very, very sort of clumsy escape. And it was stressful to watch. It was like watching a horror film. And
exactly why I don't like horror films.
Well, look, honestly, it was thrilling to watch. Sebastian escapes, he goes through the lobby. Now this is a big spoiler, but again, this is all set up in the prologue. He opens the door, and the whole of the cityscape, as far as the eye can see, is completely destroyed. It looks like, the only way I can kind of describe it, it looked like there was an asteroid that had sort of demolished the Earth. So there was a giant crater. All the police cars that were in the parking lot had fallen into the giant crater, and basically on the horizon all you could see was destruction. And that's where the prologue ended. So that was basically the introduction to the horror part of the game, because the whole idea, Mikami-san's basic premise is that survival horror, in order to be pure, needs to have the perfect balance of action and horror, and that's what makes it survival horror. So that first part was the horror, was a demonstration of the horror, and the next part that we saw was a demonstration of the action. And basically, it was shown to us completely out of context. Sebastian was thrown into some like dark outdoors area, and he's making his way with a lantern in his hand into this old cottage, this abandoned cottage.
Classic.
You're just going to say that after I say everything.
Well, that's all I've got, really.
So he makes his way into this cottage, and this is when we start seeing the more sort of, I guess you would describe them as garden variety enemies, although that's a term that doesn't really fit these guys because they're
refers to like gnomes and stuff.
Well, they weren't really gnome-like, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was, you know, something that Mikami introduces later on.
That was funnier in my head.
Well, anyway, these guys are sort of more like your traditional shambling kind of zombies, although they're very much, I don't know, they sort of struck me as being quite symbolic of some sort of other mental torment. So one of them is wrapped up in barbed wire. The other one is like completely peppered with glass shards. And
are they those they're the guys from the teaser?
Yeah.
Okay,
So you would
alright.
see, if you've seen the teaser trailer for the game that's been released, you'll see these guys that I'm talking about. Basically, you sort of kill them like you would your sort of average zombie, but there's certainly more of a kind of mental anguish kind of metaphor going on that I couldn't quite figure out. But again, this is all very much taking place in this kind of realm of psychosis and mental asylum madness and all that sort of thing. And then from the outside, we see an approaching horde. Sebastian gets a mine trap, puts it by the doors, and then he basically head shots all the rest of them. And there's that like really satisfying Resident Evil 4 kind of headshot splat. You won't know what I'm talking about, but trust me, it's a beautiful thing. It's a thing of beauty.
I played Resident Evil 4.
Oh, okay.
Well, I played it a little bit.
Right. Well, you would have, I'm sure, during your little foray into the game, you will remember how satisfying it feels to actually shoot one of these guys in the head. And then this is the part where things get a bit crazy. Well, crazier than they've been already. Sebastian goes down some stairs. He is in a hallway, and all of a sudden the hallway just switches. So you're no longer in this kind of cottage, or are you? I don't know. It was really confusing. He's looking behind him. He's looking in front of him. He doesn't know where he is. The environment just seems completely different. And then all of a sudden, this massive river of blood goes like just envelops him from the end of the hallway. He wakes up, or suddenly comes to, or whatever, and he's back in the mental asylum. So they're playing with time and space. If not time, they're definitely playing with space, and again, our sense of reality. And Mikami has basically said of this little mechanic that we saw, this little sort of central hook, that this is what's going to separate the evil within. It's what's really going to make it sort of stand out from the crowd.
All right. Well, Resident Evil 4 is very much, well, at the moment, that's very much sort of his opus. What does this have in common with that?
Well, it's immediately very cinematic. Yeah. So it's presented in extra widescreen, which means that you can see a lot of your environment around you, which was like Resident Evil 4 as well, but this is taking it a step further. And he's drawing very heavily from his horror film influences as well. So he's treading a fine line between film and game, but he's certainly, when it's straight gameplay, it's straight gameplay. Like this is not an interactive movie or anything like that. It's just it's incredibly cinematic looking. And yeah, as I said, it is gorgeous to look at, and he's definitely going back to all the sort of tropes that we recognise. Limited ammo, overwhelming odds, and yeah, it's sort of looking to be an incredibly exciting return to the genre for him. Yeah,
right. So this is very much for, if you like Resident Evil 4, if you like traditional survival horror.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so traditional as, I mean, you can run and shoot at the same time, for example. So it's not so traditional that it's unplayable, as some of the earliest survival horrors are for some people. But it is definitely more like in the vein of Resident Evil 4, which is that incredibly creepy but also really thrilling ride. So yeah, I am super excited. I can't wait to see more. And for everything else on the Evil Within, keep it locked in to IGN.